this is good feedback. So, and the good news is we're kind of very much in line with what we've just been saying, that this was our 4-point plan that we came up with. Again, this is just a brainstorm, this is totally open for discussion. But we figured that there were four key things that Khronos could do from its side. One, let's get much closer cooperation between the consortium and the community, because there's the larger companies are in the working group, but most of the people out there are not in the working group. So I think that's one reason why we have this disconnect and people haven't realised that Open Cloud was there. And blah, blah, blah. So the proposal is, as well as these meetups, to have a more long-term communication channel established, a mailing list or some other electronic form that's open to all, and no Khronos membership needed. So that's, and we can take any ideas on, do people prefer a wiki or email or some other way of communication, but opening up a communication channel with no barriers to entry at all. The second one was the Open COLLADA, as we just were discussing. Khronos can't, and I think shouldn't, fund Open COLLADA ad infinitum, because if Khronos is having to fund something, it means that it's not getting the community momentum. There's something wrong, broken in the ecosystem. So the COLLADA and Open COLLADA as an open source project must be meeting an industry need, and therefore encouraging people to contribute and benefit. As you were saying, your benefit is more than your contribution. But to prime the pump, if necessary, the Khronos board has put aside some funding where we could do a funded project in the open source repository to at least fix all the major known bugs and get things off to a flying start, if we need to. Again, as we were discussing over coffee, I'm a big believer in Darwinian mechanics, and so if we're having to keep doing that, it's broken. But perhaps we can kickstart.
I think having seed money is good, but if we could, I'll throw out something hypothetical here: is set up an Open COLLADA Foundation that could raise donations from more people. Because if you look at what drives software engineering, obviously money, people having a plan, leadership, communication, and so all those aspects need to be there in the open source community. Because if there's an organization, a foundation which can actually, like one beautiful example is Mozilla, right? Although their funding is a little different from Search Feeds, but they've been able to be very successful, right? And so people are prepared to make donations, and it's tax-free, and that there's a reasonable expectation that they're going to get what they want. The bugs are going to be fixed, and we're going to deal with the new versions of Windows and Linux as we go forward and things like that. Then yeah, I mean, if it's as a business model, it should be a win-win.
Yeah.
The question is, it's writing the proposal into the community and shopping it, and getting some sort of founder members to sign on, and some having somebody notable in the community. You need to find your Linus Torvalds and to
That's an interesting idea, because that's a much more that's much wiser use of some seed funding, to use it to bring in more rather than just doing one-off.
Because I don't think, and I've been in the VC in the startup business. If I took a plan to shop Open COLLADA to a set of VCs, I'm not sure I would get their money. Right.
This is going to be non-profit.
But if I could take it as a foundation and saying the model is like Mozilla or Linux or others, but you guys need to pay or contribute both, right?
But so your expectation then, would it be that it would be companies that are using COLLADA rather than? I wouldn't expect VC.
No, I don't think there's a VC model there. Right. If there was a VC model where it could still be open source, that's an interesting possibility. But then we're in the VC capital of the world here. But I would say let's talk to the community, right? And find out who's got, because
and enable either monetary contribution. That's a very interesting idea, or contribution in kind, obviously, engineering effort, because it is an open source project.
I mean, we've had the notion of things like feature sabbaticals on some of my engineering teams. Engineer did well in his project. We give them 3 months, go write some open source code, right? Pay back to the community. That's our contribution.
Cool. That's a good idea.
What about and I mean, just I'm thinking of the idea of say like Kickstarter. Not necessarily Kickstarter is the platform that one would use, but that idea, because I feel that I know enough people, especially from the building industry, and same thing, ISO is such an importance that like they won't do it otherwise. Don't waste my time. That engineers, even if we went down and said, hey, how many of you guys would pitch in $5 to get Unity's importer of Collada working? I think you'd get enough people that say, hey, I'll throw in half of what a salad's going to cost at this conference. And that kind of idea where you essentially crowdsource an idea, but someone would have to say, a legitimate source would have to say, hey guys, we're going to try to solve this little issue right here to help these people out. Who's interested? We're not going to pay for it, or maybe we'll match, or however you want to break that down. It's like I'm with you. Find some way to get the community interested, because I mean I know, again, I'm not in the gaming, so I imagine those guys in that can speak for if you helped Unity get away from FBX and really get on their Collada. I bet you raise funds for that today and tomorrow.
Yeah, I agree. That's a very interesting idea.
And what you are doing here, if you found a secure the API of Open Collada, which is not a path which is too far, you are making a fair fight against FBX, and you get the open stuff as well. So you get the kind of SDK that FBX provides, but the problem is with FBX, people will have to change the SDK and update. But then you will get this specification which is free, and also the SDK open source. So it's really a win-win, as long as you can kind of also have some level of control over the API of Collada, which is very wide, and you can make it right inside Open Collada. Because some people were totally overwhelmed with all the possibilities of Collada. So with Open Collada, if you can give a no-brainer import and export, and that's okay. If people want to go further, they can. But just doing the first level of importing geometry could be addressed easily.
Yes. And jumping ahead, that's because Tom from Blender couldn't be here today. He's not here. He's going to be at SIGGRAPH, and we'll probably have another meetup like this at SIGGRAPH to keep things moving on. But we did kind of outline this in an open letter that went out last week, and that was Tom's suggestion too, is that Collada is too complicated, and we can simplify this first step by and his suggestion was have two really basic profiles, a basic model and a basic character was his suggestion.
Yeah, at least it can be the same specification, but with a very simple API within Open Collada, so that people don't have to care. It's just like a UI. You can have I see an API like a UI. You can have a high level, and if you want to go deeper, you can have some advanced control. But it's not what people want to have, say 90%. So.
Okay. So an API.
Yeah. Very simple API.
A simple API.
Yeah.
Right, because a lot of people like FBX because of the API.
Yeah. I mean, the specification don't have to be much simplified for Collada if you want to support all the other resources, because it's probably this way for a reason. But say there are other tools that we can have with WebGL stuff and export for the web. In that case, it's very important to be much simpler than Collada is.
Yes, right. Agreed.
So you're suggesting to have kind of a API in Open Collada that gives you simple, quick, easy access to, let's say, whatever's covered through the base level badge in the performance test suite.
Yeah, I want my indexes, my vertexes, no-brainer. Yeah,
right.
I want my materials, that's it. Give me a nice structure. I don't want to know about all this path, all this indirection, and all that.
Right.
Yeah, I think we've heard that a lot, right?
Yeah. And the interesting thing to me in there is that there's been similar discussions in terms of conditioning and transforming that data for the web, right? There was discussion about, in the working group, about having a JSON meta model that allows you to represent the XML in a different, not changing the file format per se, but the representation of it.
Yeah.
So you could essentially say, all right, the library emits a certain different format as well that's better suitable for, let's say, web consumption or whatnot.
Yes, exactly. For instance, in Collada there is, I don't know, a lot of ways to represent what a transform is. There is even stack of transform per node, which is not supported by anyone in a runtime engine, or people have to resample every keyframe before importing their own engine. So that situation should not happen for indie developers who wants to do like a WebGL small app.
Right.
And we could have something, even within Open Collada, could produce a JSON representation, and you have all the control in there to do it. So, for instance, for transform, it could just be a matrix, and that's it for the first step.
Yes.
Just an example.
Yes. I think making the first step simple
Yes.
is a big advantage.
Yeah, I prefer creating some frustration for developers and get some feedback instead of doing everything possible and being overwhelmed.
Yes.
Mm.
Yep.
Thinking in terms of if you actually were to have Khronos group fund some fixing, would it be worth going to all of your members and finding out, if we actually do fund these fixes, will that assist you in adopting this?
Yes.
And is there actually a payback there?
Yes. Yes, you absolutely want to make sure that we're focused on the right area, and if we do prime the pump, it's going to make a difference, it's going to move the needle. You don't want to spend money and just end up in the same place.
It'd be nice too if they had some skin in the game, if you're going to put up funding from the group itself and get the vendors to put up funding too, which means that.
That's why the foundation is potentially a good idea, because there are a lot of big companies that actually are depending on Collada, so a relatively modest contribution could actually help them in quite a substantial way.
But I think that foundation then has to come with leadership, a plan, and credibility. And though you can't give an absolute guarantee, but you need to have the endorsement of certainly Khronos and other things that this is it, right? This we're going to make this work,
right?
Because if I'm a company and I'm asked to pony up $100,000 or an engineer for whatever, I want to make there's no guarantees, but I want.
You need to be confident that something's going to happen.
I want to know that it's being run by professionals, and the people who are going to manage risk, and they've done this before and know how to do it. Because if I'm basing my business on this, and it's going to be deliverable in my future product roadmap, I can't afford to have it.
Right, can't be a point of failure.
Right.
Oh, strong risk of point of failure.
Yeah, and so it's it's going to be run by adults. Right. But I'd be happy to help contribute in writing something like that.
If I may, and then to go along with a foundation, though, if it is possible for those that again just want to contribute to actually solving one particular issue, because people dealing with organizations sometimes they just don't want to do it, regardless. And then there is the money to actually run the organization and all those other things. Where, at least in my personal experience, I find those that just say, hey, again, don't want to sign up for anything, don't care about our logo being up somewhere, I want to solve that problem.
Right.
And here's my ante into the game.
Right.
So if that can be something that also maybe is offered in some way, either under the,
I agree. I think contribution in kind or contribution through funding, you need to enable both. Right, because that's how you get a vibrant community. So people that really care can control their own destiny and the things that they want to happen, and they don't need permission from anybody. But there is some momentum from the stakeholders that actually care about this happening in a larger sense.
right.
And the two together can be a lot of positive energy if it's done correctly. Yeah.
I think that to this, if we're thinking crowdfunding, how big is this crowd? I mean, architects out there, engineers, know of the open COLLADA standard and know what the problems are. But there are bigger crowds out there who are taking advantage of COLLADA and they don't get to know it.
Right.
So perhaps we could somehow join sides with game studios in my case, which I know, and ask for the gamers collaboration or something, or a start, or studios which are involved with Khronos, but are not involved with Open COLLADA as it is. So there is a bigger crowd out there we could appeal to somehow.
Yes.
And I believe most of them are not aware they can do it.
Right.
Well, the engineers agreed. For me, I think it's the tool vendors, right? I mean, I've talked, like I said, Unity 3D is one of those that I've talked to. This is a problem they want to solve. Companies like Pinocchio that do digital fabrication, that are getting assets from a variety of different tools, SketchUp being one of them, they want to solve this. So I mean, it's not just saying, oh, the indie engineer, sure, that guy too, but we're saying going to the people like Autodesk and saying, hey, here are these markets that you're trying to get into, such as digital fabrication, that, if you can support these certain things, then you get the tool vendors, and those are the guys that come in, that as they begin to adopt and get on board, I've watched with other things, where then you have the smaller guy going, wow, I need to do that because NVIDIA did it, or that kind of thing, it gets that. So I think it is kind of saying, how do you get some of those bigger giants to embrace? Because if I walk around a lot of the show floor right now and say, hey, wear a shirt that says, come to me, and if you can tell me what COLLADA is, I'll give you $1. I'm not going to be giving out as many dollars as I would hope I would.
What I see regarding this approach is we're facing people who want their problem solved on one hand, and on the other hand, we might have a lot of people who are not aware of the quality of what they're receiving can be improved. And this is my point. I mean, if you have a problem and you know the problem, where it is, you can try to solve it yourself, to this kind of profile, sensitivity is already done. But I was thinking about a bigger mass, a crowd in fact, that they're not aware of what's going on, and trying to appeal to them. Really, absolutely, architects, ITs, myself. No, it's not. We're here after all, right? We have those people who will never come to this kind of meetings, and they have never ever heard of COLLADA, the .die file and such. They know nothing about this stuff, but if we somehow could possibly tell them and ask for their support, I think there's plenty of strength there we could use.
Yes, no, I agree. So distilling that last 5 minutes of discussion, it seems like the two vital ingredients here is communication, because communication hasn't been good, obviously, and the credibility. Credibility that if you get involved, it's actually going to be a worthwhile solution to your problem, and therefore it's worth your while.
Return on investment that goes to the
Right.
greater good.
Right.
Right.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
If you can bring those two things together, then that's when the magic happens. So. Okay. Then the third point there was, I think, something that Khronos can do. You do have these conformance tests. They are quite expensive. You've actually invested quite a lot of money into creating them, but they're difficult to use, and the report that comes out is undecipherable. So that's like an easy fix. We can make the test suite more understandable, and if we do end up doing a basic model, we can focus our efforts there first on that conformance test. But we can put the conformance tests in the same open source repository, right? Because longer term, we want the community to be able to say, okay, here's new functionality, here's a conformance test building on the framework that we already have in hand. So.
But does the conformance test contains all the possibilities of the COLLADA format implemented? I mean, any examples or instances of things like, I don't know, morphing, skinning, or more advanced things with JSL profiles and all that? Does it contain all that?
If you want to pass the superior badge, then yes, all of that will be in there.
That's right, because one of the problems for people is they didn't have any example of things implemented, so it was kind of coding blind.
Right.
So,
yeah. things are grouped, I mean, obviously, you can discuss whether the grouping is appropriate. Maybe it's better to have something that is basic character. I think that's really the part that doesn't exist right now. The basic model and the base level badge, I think that correlates pretty well. A lot of the character-oriented features are tested in the higher level badges, which might be difficult to attain because you don't have a full-on shader reading and writing implementation.
Right.
So maybe it's good to kind of retrench that a little bit. But yes, if you really want to test everything, the highest level badge has all that and there's sample files and whatnot. Yeah.
Yeah, what I meant is really that even beyond testing, it's great that you provide examples of people.
Right. Right. Yeah, I mean, are there other examples of sample code being enabling?
I mean, the conformance test suite is not really about sample code. I guess the sample content really is
Sample
the
content, yes.
valuable part in there.
For instance, it was invaluable, like in the COLLADA wiki when there was a sample of what is interleaved geometry and all that, because there is no example anywhere. So if the engine wants to support interleaved geometry, then you had to hardcode your COLLADA yourself or to create it by hand or just guessing. So it's really great that there is a kind of broad view of samples.
Yes, interesting. That's a good idea.
Yeah, yeah, and if there's anything missing in that respect, it certainly should be added in. Yeah.
Okay. Any other thoughts on this? Are any of these wrong? I mean, obviously we can tune them, but does anyone think, oh my god, that's like crazy that they're going to try to do that? Or is anything really big missing from this? I mean, you had some good ideas about foundation ways of getting people engaged, but is this generally the right direction?
One thing that might help, generally when there's an open standard, it always helps to have a designated reference implementation.
Yes.
So Open COLLADA became the official reference implementation, which it would need to pass all its conformance tests in order to do so. That might be a step in the right direction as well.
Yes, I agree. That's definitely something I think we want to aim for. We need to be careful. Inside Khronos, reference has a very specific meaning, and that is it supersedes the specification. So it might be like the blessed sample implementation. Well, I don't know. Perhaps in this case,
that would make a
it would
difference.
actually be a reference.
That would make a difference for big companies because they put their money on something solid given by Khronos. That would be good.
Right.
It's it.
I just think a way to increase the level of evangelism as well. I mean, you guys are doing this, and I don't mean to be disrespectful here or minimize what you are, but the word is not out there.
Right.
And somehow hitting more headlines and.
Yes. Yeah, communication and credibility. Right.
Yeah, but.
Yes, I agree. Okay, so there's some other stuff we've been talking about. Well, it's WebGL, because you brought it up earlier. But this seems like a big need that's about to really arrive in the industry, and it seems like COLLADA could play a role. I don't think there's a very clear vision yet, though, has coalesced in the industry about how we do this. So this is kind of an interesting topic for discussion. As Uli was saying earlier, there's been some discussion inside the working group about JSON, but compression and streaming is key. It's a big missing piece in the industry. But if we can find a part of the community, an overlapping intersection between the COLLADA community and the WebGL community that really wants to focus on this authoring and deployment issue, that seems to be like a huge area of a positive energy that we can enable and tap into.
I mean, let me revoice mine, but I've already spoken to Neil. But I don't think JSON's going to do it for 3D because it's character-based, and we need a binary compressed format for getting from hosted environments to browser environments. It needs to be a W3C standard, and and that's the missing piece. It connects WebGL to COLLADA or whatever it is on the back end, the tools and things on the back end.
Right.
But you can get both. You could have some scene graph inside JSON and have the blobs reference as external sources and stream the binary data like vertices and all that separately.
Yeah, but it's
Yeah.
got to be open. It's got to be standard. It's got to be efficient as a protocol going across, writing across HTTP.
Yeah.
So the movie guys have solved this, by and large with RTSP and the streaming video and MPEG and things like that. But that's
Yes.
easy because they're just compressing pixels, which is not that easy. But I mean, their data all looks the same. Whereas in 3G, our data is a lot more complicated, has a
Yes.
lot more semantics,
Yes.
and we don't have these sort of brute force compression algorithms that work really well. And unless if anybody does well, I'd love to hear from them. But I don't believe that they exist yet.
Yes.
And so it's a missing piece because this will drive Web3. This will drive 3D on the web in the browser.
Yes. I agree.
But there's also a trade-off between optimization, like compressing it as good as possible, making it binary and whatnot, and just sheer interoperability and ubiquity. I mean, if you have XML, which by the way works, I've shown this a couple of times already, you can perfectly, there's frameworks that read COLLADA XML and then display that in WebGL. If you do that, or if you have a JSON representation of the same data, chances are it's going to work in most environments. I think the more you optimize, the more you compress, the more you make it binary, the more you're going to rely on browser-specific implementations to actually process that data. Whereas, for example, if there's just a simple transformation to JSON, chances are all browsers are going to be able to read that, and whatever's missing is easily implemented in a JavaScript library. The more you optimize, the harder it's going to be to just throw that in after the fact into a shipping browser.
I just have to play devil's advocate here. Why couldn't we possibly have both?
Yes. I think you do need both. I have a slide, I don't have it here, but it's like images have JPEG, and music has MP3, and video has H.264, and 3D has big vacuum.
Right.
And we need it, but I agree. But you see, because the counter argument to what you're saying is that the browser vendors are the ones that need this most, because compression and streaming is going to be so critical, and when the models get to be gigabytes, we absolutely need binary compression and streaming. And
Is that so?
And yes, I believe so. Else the networks are going to die.
Yeah.
And if we don't get this solved soon, the web browsers are going to be like the mess like the video codecs are. Look the mess they got themselves into over that. We don't want to repeat that for the 3D community. We have to get ahead of the curve.
I could have also one nice message I kept receiving, which is click here to read about troubleshooting for WebGL on the iPad. I mean, if we are smart enough to detect when this situation occurs, we could possibly be smart enough to prepare the web content and the right format regarding the platform, if we can choose.
Mm-hmm.
If there's one single format, we'll have to buy to it. And perhaps it won't feel, one size won't fit all.
Right. Yes. I think having one format is probably too far. But having a small number of formats is, again, as we get the video chaos that's happening.
Well, there's also a difference between, in my mind at least, between format and delivery container or representation, right? I mean, I think all of what we've been talking about still can be perfectly achieved by the COLLADA format. You would probably end up with different representations, different delivery containers, depending on what your particular use case is there.